Most awaitedly, I'd like to request our chief guest, who needs new introduction, and he's Dr. M.K. Ranjitsingh ji, former IS, former Director, Wildlife Preservation of India. And I'd like to just tell everybody of you that Sir has renounced his royal status, and in a country where we have seen how tigers have been killed in the past centuries. He is a pioneer of tiger conservation, and he is a well-known person in the country, mostly as an icon, if you can consider. And you all have Google, you all have smartphones with you, so you can just Google his name, and you will see hundreds of articles of him. And I was also very inspired reading all of them when I was preparing for this conference. And then, just as I checked it, I've known about Sir last year because a few of us are UPSC aspirants, and we have read about his case on Ranjitsingh versus Union of India, how it helped in the just transition, how it helped the environmental jurisdiction of the country to take a step ahead, to take one leap ahead, and how it gives us that scope for much more contribution and much more vision to proceed in that direction. So, on these words, I'd like to request Sir to please come and address the gathering. We are really honored to have you here today.
My esteemed colleagues on the dais and friends, I'm deeply grateful and honored for this invitation, which gives me an opportunity to meet like-minded people and to motivate, if extent possible, the common cause of saving the natural heritage of India, which is no less important than any other heritage of this country, of which we are all proud about, cultural, religious, everything else. But this is natural. And if the other heritages are man-made, this heritage is made by God, of which Guru Jambhani was a great contributor. I would suggest, that the relevance of Guru Jambhaji's teaching to the present situation and to India in particular, that is something I would suggest something should be produced and made popular. And I would request Professor Indra Bishnoi to take leadership in this regard, because he was a pioneer, Lord Jambhaji, Guru Jambhaji. And I'll talk to 2-3 things about it in my later thing. But who are the greatest apostles of India? What has India taught the world? And who are the greatest representatives in modern times of Indian culture, Indian heritage? Gautam Buddha, Mahavir, Gandhiji, Vivekanand, and Jambhaji. The only thing is, and this is rather sad, that unlike at least Kabir, more people know about Kabir than they know about Jambhaji, and that should be publicized. The 2 or 3 things that were taught: sanctity of life, that they matter. I mean, this is India, and I've written this in my book. India is one of the easiest countries in the world to affect conservation of nature, because we are vegetarian, majority. We believe in the sanctity of life. There are certain animals and trees which are sacred, and they survive because of that. The Nilgai survives because of the name Nilgai. And when I said, no, don't change the name, Nilgai rahega, roz nahi khayenge. That is how you save it. And the utilization, one of the first chapters I've written in my first book was Religious Sentiment in Wildlife. What religious sentiment has done to conserve nature, which is the manifestation of the creation of the Supreme Being. Our religious sentiment throughout Asia, and that chapter was very much appreciated by the Duke of Edinburgh, wrote that forward to the book, and in which the contribution by of the Bishnoi family takes so much priority. One was that, and the other one, I'm coming to it, is community participation, and that's very important. India, as I said, was one of the easiest countries in the world to protect nature because the empathy is there, the feeling is there, and you don't have to teach anything new. But India is a paradigm, is a paradox. Uh, we do not kill, but we do not prevent others from killing. I'm talking about general people. Uh, we are a passive conservationist community. We uh, uh, hold things in sacred. कोई और करता है तो बीच में नहीं आते. What Jambhuji told was that even a tree is sacred, and the community takes up cudgels to save it. They are the only. There are others, and I'll come to it. But of all and I made a study of this, of all the communities, and in India, we are a democracy, and are proud to be one. And in a democracy, you have to have community support. You have to have community acceptance and community activity to that extent possible. But India has had no green policy. India, why we are suffering is, I'm sorry to say this, is that conservation doesn't get you votes. Everybody wants national parks and sanctuaries to be denotified. वहाँ ये हमको करने नहीं देते, ये नहीं करने देते. So, unless the community asks for conservation, you will not get it. And therefore, one of the best things I've done in my life is to set up 9 new national parks and set up 14 new sanctuaries and double the size of 3 existing parks. But after my departure as forest secretary, so they have reduced the areas in Madhya Pradesh, my own state, and this. And all the time as director of wildlife, I used to keep on prodding all the chief wildlife. Yeah, banao, yahan bachega. These are the last havens of hope. But again, you will have people who will not want that because it stops you from doing everything. What was taught by Jambhuji and the other preceptors was that they matter in the India of Mahavir, Buddha, and Jambhuji. Aren't the animals and birds citizens of India? Of course they are. They matter. And we are not talking about that they matter everywhere or they matter everywhere too. But at least in their area of existence, they have to have priority. कहीं तो उसको जीवित रखना है कि कहीं भी नहीं. Are we going to, you see, Gandhiji said something very interesting. There is everything in nature for the need of everybody, but there is nothing in nature for the greed of anybody. Are we going to save only that which survives and is saved after satisfying the need and greed of everybody, including the corporate houses? So, can we call ourselves the land of Buddha, Vivekanand, and Jambhuji? I mean, and let us not forget that India is one of the very few countries in the world which has fundamental duties and the fundamental duty says, and every citizen shall, and every lawyer will tell you what is the difference between will and shall. Shall is a must. Every citizen shall protect forest and wildlife. And you cannot claim fundamental rights unless you can fulfill your fundamental duties. It's a quid pro quo, sine qua non. And the Constitution and the Directive Principle State Policy says that that the government shall protect forest and wildlife. So, when you break, are we doing it? The citizens and government. And the breaking of the Constitution is worse than breaking any law. And the Supreme Court orders also have a force of law. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court doesn't pull up people for contempt of court, but there it is. I'll come to that very quickly. It may, therefore, but here you are. They are the only active contribute. You see, religious sentiment, as my predecessor talked about it, they are lingdos. The sacred groves are lingdos. And there is a community which looks after them. They are also called, one of my batchmates in the IAS was James Michael Lindo. They come from, and you go along in that magnificent plateau. Cherrapunji, by the way, which is the largest thing. Cherrapunji, which is in thing, has deficiency of water in the summer because they've cut everything. Zoom cultivation. The only way it survives are the lingdos, sacred groves. Rajasthan, the Marubhumi, Marwar, the Thar desert, was a forest once upon a time. There are fossils. There is a fossil park there, which had fossils. Climate changed. And climate changed over millennia, thousands, millions of years. And it's become a desert. Where are pockets of vegetation left, except in the Vishnu community and the Warrens? They are the last repositories of xerophytic vegetation surviving in the world. They matter. And I compliment the Vishnu communities for what they have done in this regard, of saving them. And they matter as much as any temple. They are temples also of a religious belief and of God. And we are trying to save a thing. You see, to me, the area matters more than the animal. We used the tiger to say something much more important than the tiger, the habitats of the tiger. The last remnants of your natural national heritage. The habitats. You can have the habitats without the animals. You cannot have the animals without wild animals. You can only have them in zoos and in Bantara. Anyway, so there you are. And there is a saying in Gujarati, Lakh marjo par lakh na taran har no marjo. Let lack die, let not the savior of the lack, the animal that thing. And they give you much more than, they are not just the animal. They are not only repository only. They give you great ecological benefits which we are not aware of. When we created the first 9 reserves, and we went all over, tiger reserves, Palamau. Palamau is a rain shadow area. Palamau is was then in Bihar, now Jharkhand. And I mustn't take too much time. And a DFO took in 3 years. In 3 years, he took the difference in the water flow. The water flow was divided into 4 categories: September ending, December ending, March ending, perennial. And in 3 years, The difference was that the streams which stopped flowing in September flowed till December. In December, streams started flowing till March, and the March became perennial. And if that was what Palamau, after its making into a park, was giving to the people of India, it was more important than the 6 tigers that were then in the park. And I love tigers. That was the contribution. And there are other studies, and I don't want to waste, which showed what these ecological benefits are. So they are not. They are not anti-development. You cannot have survival of human beings, let alone development, without ecological benefits. And now, with the amendment of this act, you have taken out areas from outside of the Forest Conservation Act. The amendment of the Forest Conservation Act, which we are challenging, and which takes away the entire border of the. So now the glaciers are melting, and the glacier melting is going to the water comes down in the summer, and it gives you water in summer because the snow is melting. So when there is a need for that, now those glaciers will melt, and this climate change will have humongous. I would also like to say this, that in drafting the act in 72, I had kept hunting reserves because it was a state subject then, and I had to keep because of the hunting lobby, hunting reserves rakhe the kuch. Then when I came back for my second tenure after coming from Bhopal and the Bhopal grass tragedy, I amended the act and I did away with the game reserves. And I brought in two community reserve and conservation reserve. Two other categories apart from national park sanctuaries, communities. And the community reserve was brought in to bring in the communities to protect nature. Because by that time I had learned a certain thing. And if the community reserve has come about in the constitution, in the Wildlife Protection Act, because I learned from the Bishnoi communities and others what the communities themselves can do. And they can do a darn sight better job than the government can. And that is why, and I would like it to be recorded here, that that amendment came about largely because of the proactiveness of the Bishnoi communities, and there were others. But you were the leader. There are others in the country, but no community has that. And this message and this proactive thing, these matters, these have to be protected for what they are and what they can do. That is a message that must go in. I'll be very quickly about the act and the thing. We have challenged the amendment to the Forest Conservation Act, which I think is a disaster, because we need to have this and taking out 100 thing from the radius. You mean Rajasthan is gone now? Forest Conservation Act will not apply 100 miles from our borders in Pakistan. So the area is gone. Anything can be done. You see, we are not foolish people, conservationists. Conservation is the art of the possible. It's a compromise. Life is a compromise. But हम ये कहते हैं भैया ऐसा ना करो, ये करो. ये करने से ये बचाव होगा. थोड़ा खर्चा ज्यादा होता है, so what? Do you realize that the Godavan, they unfortunately, it is not a vahan of any god or goddess, otherwise वो बच जाती है. Okay, it is a godfatherless species, and I could not make it into the national bird of India because Dr. Karan Singh says कि ऐसा कैसे रख सकते हो, इसका नाम मिस पढ़ कर उससे तो गाली हो जाती है ये नाम. तो poor Godavan is not even a thing, but is blessed with an awful name. So then we settled for the peacock, but that's another story. But I couldn't make it with a state bird of Rajasthan. And only less than 100 left. In Bishnoi areas and the firing ranges of the thing. If 220 kilometers of lines can be made underground for which we are fighting, the Godavan can be saved from extinction. It takes 1 crore to underground it and then it is permanent. 210 crores is what is required to save. CSR money. You know how many 16 companies have made in 1 year who are operating in that area? 2,600 crores. What is 10% of that? 2% of that. 1 year, 16. There are 104 companies. If they put in that much, you can save, and the entire area is to be covered with gas. You see, it's not only the Great Indian Bustard, it's not only the heron, it is grazing areas of the local communities, of the Danis and of other graziers. It is, are we going to cover up the entire Thar with panels? You can have it elsewhere. You can have it on the canals. Because that's what we've done. If you have it on the canal, you have 4 advantages. 900 kilometers of the canal goes through Rajasthan. It hasn't been covered. Gujarat mein sab cover kar diya. You can, you see, you prevent evaporation. Along the canals, there are roads, so you don't have to build roads. You don't have to have electricity poles because they are there. You can have things. As I said, the evaporation will prevent the dust from going in. You can, most importantly, you have water to clean the panels. Now, you're digging wells, bore wells, in the Thar desert to clean those panels. And that water is a mineral. It is over millions of years. That water should be for the sheep and the goats and the wild animals and human beings. That water is for canals. The canals are still not covered. 900 kilometers. As I said, they will be. So, this is a kind of warped situation that we are fighting against, and that needs awareness. Now, coming to the case, and I'm taking too much time. The case is, there has been a very fine judgment very recently last year, in which is Ranjitsingh versus the others, where the Supreme Court realized for the first time, it's a landmark judgment, that ecological security and environmental security is a fundamental right. But are we translating it in action? It should be translated into action. Otherwise, it will remain on paper like so many other things. The present situation is that the committee is to give things, the government is delaying it. Again, the Guru Jambhani said that you must plant trees. It's not, again, we are fooling ourselves. It's not just the number of trees. You know that and I was chairman of the Narmada Valley Development Authority at that point of time. The compensatory afforestation of the Narmada Valley submergence was done by planting Prosopis juliflora, the Pardesi babul, which is a weed, which finished off the grasslands of Kutch. We do not require weeds. It's not the number of trees that matter, it is the tree that matters, the khedri matters, the local trees matter, because that's where the communities, it's not only for providing sangri, but it provides so much other things. The local tree matters, not eucalyptus and Prosopis juliflora. And the second thing it is, you plant a lack of trees. After 5 years, how many survive? Who knows? So, and Supreme Court appointed a committee, and I can submit my. And be the chairman of a committee. We submit a thing of compulsory afforestation in India, and it's a very good report by professional ex-foresters. No reply from the government in 2.5 years. It's just on paper. So there it is. I'll just finish in a minute. I've gone on. Disaster management. Maybe question as to how this relates to my predecessor said something about man-made and natural disaster. But natural disasters are going to be man-made. And the greatest natural disaster, which is man-made, will be climate change. Therefore, this is an ideal place to have disaster management and the teachings of Guru Jambhoji, because the two